Hi everyone, I'm filming this video immediately after the last one. This picks up right where that one left off. This is based off of a blog post scheduled for August 2024 on my main blog about many reasons why I hate Beatrice Sparks, but the time got so long and I capped the part 1 video on the first 20 reasons, and this is going to go through reasons 21 through 30 why I hate Beatrice Sparks. I recently finished rereading this wonderful book, Unmask Alice by Rick Emerson, which I highly recommend to you guys. I have a video reviewing it at quite some length and detail in my playlist on why Beatrice Sparks was a vile fraud, and I'm going to be reading a couple of things like here and there throughout the video to illustrate the points which I'm talking about. This woman was a dangerous fraud, and just her lies had so many terrible consequences for real people, and she emotionally manipulated and preached at and lied to her intended teen audience, which is never how anyone, particularly teens, learns, anything. Number 21. Major plot threads are unresolved or dropped, like Nancy's PTSD practically non-existent, which is totally unrealistic, over being raped, and why the cops can't find Colin, or why Danny faces no consequences for denying paternity in the era of cheap, easy to get DNA tests. Is that whole Annie's baby book is just total absolute crap. I have a previous video talking about it. And so Annie's mommykins, of course she's a loving darling, forgiving mommykins. Oh, as soon as Annie tearfully confides in mommykins, oh, everything is magically all right. It's the magical mommykins trope I hate so much in Dr. Fraud's books. And so mommykins confronts Danny about, oh, you knocked up my daughter and you've been raping and abusing her. And Danny's like, oh, you can't prove it. I'm just going to say all my buddies whored around with her too. We were all sleeping together in a big gangbang or something like that. You can't prove it. Oh, okay. Mommykins just backs down because DNA tests, they just don't exist in the 90s. It might as well be the 50s. It's not like they could have even put him on Maury or Montel or whatever other shows were doing DNA tests back in the day, like Ricky Lake, to get a free trip to a nice city, a stay in a hotel, and a catered breakfast, swimming in the pool, fun sightseeing, and you get to be on television in the free DNA test. Nope, that doesn't exist. And Annie also goes to an unwed mother's home in the 90s. And that storyline is just, everything about that book is crap. And her description of the labor and birth, what little she does, it sounds suspiciously like Twilight Sleep. Oh, I wonder. Oh, it's the 1950s. In the 1990s, she zonks out from some drug she's given, and so she has no memory or pain of the birth. Oh, just like Twilight Sleep back in the day. This woman, it's like her characters were mentally in the 1950s, just like she was. What an awful, terrible writer and human. Number 22. I also believe adoption should be presented as a viable option, which is not really done so much these days. I guess kind of an extreme overreaction against what used to happen in the pre-pill and pre-Roe v. Wade era. But the way to do that is not depicting single moms as bad, automatically bad, irresponsible, unprepared parents who need to do the right thing by giving their babies to respectable married couples ASAP, preferably well-off, bourgeois, white and delightsome, as Morgbots would say, suburban couples. Oh, they can't have a baby. How dare you think you can keep your baby, Annie or Dory or whoever else gets knocked up in her books? Give it to this nice couple who's married. How dare you? You're going to be crap parent. It's so much hard work. Teens are just stupid and unprepared. Taking care of babies is a full-time job. Just pretend it never happened. Give it up to the nice couple. Don't even hold the baby. Just as soon as that baby pops out of you, bam, it's adopted. You're not really the mother. You need to be taught a lesson and slut-shamed. 1950s mentality. Adoption should also be presented as an option, not the moral default. You know she was pissed when Roe v. Wade and the wider availability of the pill to unmarried women effectively put an end to adoption mills and the baby snatch era. Number 23. She wrote the answers. She wrote the questions she answered in an awful, short-lived column, Girl to Girl, in the 1940s Joseph Barbera, yes, that Joseph Barbera cartoon, Junie Prom. She also answered them in her typical Molly Mormon way, dripping with internalized misogyny. The only reason she got so many letters was because she wrote them all. Just like her crap books, these letters too had suspiciously identical voices and quirks, and I'm going to be reading that again from Unmask Alice, talking about how she started working with Joseph Barbera of all people. Like, how could you think of such a successful cartoonist as he later became working with like a morgue bot housewife and, literary fraud? And he talking about the titles he prepared, and one of these is Junie Prom, whose stem-thin title character was plagued by love-addled suitors, and the girls got limp romance and gleaming teeth, while the boys get some cowboys, bandits, and wily animal sidekicks. Yet another reason I've never been particularly stereotypically girly, because like boys, they seem to get so much more fun than girls have been socially allowed until like fairly recently in the modern era. Even formulaic Drek needed dialogue, so Barbera went looking for writers. Fast was good. Cheap was better. Fast and cheap was perfect. Sparks landed one of the open slots at Junie Prom, and by year's end, she was writing several pieces per issue, again juggling various pen names, as I mentioned in the previous video. Her showcase feature was Girl to Girl, Junie Prom's advice column. Here, writing as B. Sparks, Beatrice dispensed slightly arch wisdom to Junie's young readers. Dear B, I like a boy very much, but it seems we are always fighting. Janet. Dear Janet, are the quarrels partly your fault? Are you jealous, possessive, selfish, or critical, like internalized misogyny? If you are sweet, thoughtful, understanding, and even-tempered, the boy won't be able to quarrel with you. B. Standard stuff for 1940s America, where men were men and women were women. Those sales of Junie Prom were abysmal. Sparks's column was, somehow, a hit. She is getting so many letters, said Barbera's publishing partner, Charles Lowey, that I am getting writer's cramp readdressing them to you. Had anyone thought to look, some details might have stood out. Many of the letters had the same peculiar syntax, just like her later fake diaries, and came from people like Vivian Brown of Boise, Idaho, Sparks's mother, now remarried and relocated. But no one was buying these comics, let alone scanning them for subtext. Joseph Barbera pulled the plug after just 7 issues, serves her right, and Junie Prom slipped into memory. Number 24. She emotionally manipulated her target audience by pretending these journals were written by fellow teens instead of an elderly Mormon crank. Number 25. Teens learn best through honesty and personally meaningful examples, not fear-mongering Mormon propaganda full of lies. Gross. Morality plays and after-school specials, they kind of went out of fashion for a reason. Number 26. Her books avoided any real literary criticism, just like they avoided any real editing, until recently, because, calling back to number 2 on the list about the avoiding editing, she presented them as real journals. Had it been known she was the true author, those books would have been slaughtered by critics, and thankfully, more and more people are reviewing them honestly now on Amazon and Goodreads and other serious literary websites and journals and such. Number 27. This one was shocking to read. She threw a temper tantrum, including breaking out in her trademark all caps, and I'll be reading that excerpt, when she discovered Columbia University's Go Ask Alice website, an accompanying book with honest, modern advice about sex, sexual health, relationships, mental health, etc. Dr. Fraud was outraged their point of view was the radical opposite of her fear-mongering, Molly Mormon crap. Thankfully, they ignored the old crank. So, talking about how she understood her most famous book's legacy, and she guarded it like an angry parent. In 1998, she found out about the other Go Ask Alice. Sparks was appalled by the content. Oh, wow, like a Molly Mormon. Particularly its judgment-free discussions of group sex, anal intercourse, and other outre activities. When Sparks discovered a spin-off paperback called The Go Ask Alice Book of Answers, a guide to physical, sexual, and emotional health, she was apoplectic and sent a series of outraged letters to Columbia University President George Rupp. An adult having a tantrum like that and thinking that would have any effect on a big university president, like loon. Written on Beatrice Matthews Sparks, Ph.D., liar, letterhead, the opening salvo was a perfect distillation of Sparks's public persona. In 1971, my book titled Go Ask Alice, she's not denying she's the writer, was published. It started the genre of young adult books that's kind of taking credit for something you didn't really do, another liar, and was a bestseller. Why is bestseller in quotes? Weirdo. It is still selling well. I am an adolescent psychologist, liar, and all my books come from true diaries or case histories of teenagers, liar, and there's a footnote. A follow-up letter stated, perhaps you are not aware that I have been an adolescent psychologist for over 30 years. She could not stop lying. I also hold a doctorate of philosophy in human behavior. Another lie. My books have won Christopher medals and been named as School Library Journal Best Books. People did not know good literature who did that. I was a 1996 National Book Awards judge and lecture around the nation. She did not deserve to be a Book Awards judge for anything or go to that grand gala he talks about at the beginning and the end of the book. While on a speaking, book signing, and award-receiving tour, she did not deserve any rewards. The Go Ask Alice guide to physical, sexual, and emotional health was shown to me by a librarian. She presumed I had written the book. Now cue the all caps, her pet fetish. Columbia's Go Ask Alice is maligning my reputation and credibility. A crank. I'm glad they ignored this loon. Number 28. None of her characters have any free will or moral agency. That's one of her pet tropes and one of the things I most hate about her crap. They're passive victims who are tricked, used, exploited, raped, taken advantage of by immoral friends or con artists. Never do they get into these situations of their own choice, and never is there anything but an automatic negative outcome from things Dr. Fraud disapproved of, like premarital sex. Number 29. She was so outraged at literary critic Alleen Pace Nilsen's remarkably restrained 1979 article, The House That Alice Built. She gave orders for Mrs. Nilsen, a fellow Mormon, by the way, to be barred entry to her 2012 funeral. She just never forgot. The alleged crime was asking for details about Dr. Fraud's training and credentials, and the real story behind Go Ask Alice. Mrs. Nilsen printed the truth, that Dr. Fraud danced all around direct answers and gave no evidence of professional affiliation or formal training. This resulted in an angry letter to School Library Journal. She really did think the sun shone out of her fraudulent ass, and I will read some of that as well. Up to this point, Sparks had been lucky. When she claimed to be a psychologist, the local papers went along. When she came forward as Alice's editor, the Daily Herald did everything but canonize her. Promoting Voices in Jay's journal, Sparks had used professional bookers, landing softball interviews with passive reporters. None of them pushed back or played gotcha. They asked the right questions and said the right things. Then there was Sparks's luckiest break, being deleted from Go Ask Alice, which she never forgot that supposed slight. Had her name stayed on the cover, she would have done the media circuit, and that might have sabotaged everything. You told the Spokesman Review that Alice died 6 months later, but you told the Florence News that it was 2 weeks later. What gives? Or, did you graduate from UCLA? Really? What year? Long pause. Hello? Disaster. Instead, she was forcibly shielded, and Alice evaded scrutiny. By the time Sparks went public, the danger had seemingly passed. Nilsen, immensely likable and ferociously smart, and she is still alive as of this date, asked about Sparks's credentials. Sparks ducked the question. Nilsen circled back, referencing the dust jacket for Voices. Beatrice Sparks has been working as a professional counselor with troubled kids since 1955. Where did Sparks train? Sparks lapsed into one of her stories about working at a drug rehab. Nilsen asked about the clinic. Sparks deflected, talking about the need for counseling and about her own deep connection with teens. That gave Nilsen a segue. What was the story behind Go Ask Alice? How had it really come together? Sparks unspooled the same basic tale, the youth convention, the call from a counselor, the hysterical teen, the ongoing friendship, the diary, the urge to share Alice's story with others. Going into the interview, Nilsen had believed Alice was real or close to real. A friend in the publishing world had said Alice's parents threatened a lawsuit, and that's why the book was anonymous. According to Sparks, however, it was all to connect with young readers. Oh, there were many reasons for publishing it anonymously, she told Nilsen, but my reason was for the kids. Even to Nilsen, a fellow Mormon, this sounded a little glossy. Didn't Sparks want the credit for such a colossal smash? Sparks said it wasn't about ego or becoming rich and famous. It was about making a difference. Published in School Library Journal's October 1979 issue, Nilsen's article, The House That Alice Built, was fair and objective, which may have been the problem. Nilsen didn't pile on, but she also didn't lie. When Sparks evaded a question, Nilsen said so, and Sparks evaded repeatedly, using dodgy words and nebulous phrases. She attended UCLA. She worked as a counselor. When mentioning Sparks's work at a California drug rehab, Nilsen added that Sparks was vague about the specifics. What about Sparks's credentials and her claims of majoring in psychology? On this dust jacket of voices, wrote Nilsen, it appears that Sparks is a professional youth counselor or social worker, but during the interview, I was given no evidence of formal training or professional affiliation. Even so, Nilsen pulled her punches. She didn't ask to see a diploma, and she dutifully relayed Alice's standard backstory, ignoring the contradictions. She also didn't ask about Jay's journal, then approaching paperback release. If she had, Sparks might have blundered, leading Nilsen to the Barretts, who lived just 9 miles away, at which point the whole thing could have collapsed, taking Sparks down with it. But Nilsen went easy, and Sparks, who should have been grateful, lashed out instead. Alleen Pace Nilsen's article regarding Go Ask Alice was not only incorrect, but in places openly hostile. What a whiner, began Sparks's letter to School Library Journal. The article was entitled, The House That Alice Built. Said title is totally incorrect. Oh, poor baby. Most of the money received from Go Ask Alice has gone into rehabilitation and other forms of helping young people. Can you prove that? My husband is an important, respected, and successful businessman in both California and Utah. Helping kids is as important to him as it is to me. Those 3 words, important, respected, successful, were key. More than money, Beatrice Sparks sought elevation, to be somebody. As Alice wrote in her diary, I want so much to be someone important. Sparks's writing, her prosperous husband, her many good works, they were tiles in a personal mosaic. So was her oft-touted education, and she snapped at Nilsen's no evidence of formal training comment. No evidence of formal training? I graduated from UCLA as a psychology major. What a liar. After another 4 paragraphs, she finally signed off. Beatrice M. Sparks, Provo, Utah. Number 30. She couldn't even forge properly, and narcissistically kept the evidence of her forgery and fakery instead of destroying the paper trail. That's another thing which I am going to be reading from. I read part of this as well in my previous review about Unmask Alice, and this is Mr. Emerson. He's going through the vault at BYU, a climate-controlled vault with all these papers from Dr. Freud over the many decades, 1949 to 2000. She saved everything with her name, a trait that quickly turns from interesting into ghastly. Let's dispatch with the basics. Beatrice Sparks was, in every sense, a terrible liar, and no kidding. Her deceptions weren't just frequent and hurtful. They were klutzy, bordering on incompetent. For one thing, Sparks saved numerous drafts of her fraud. It's one thing to save a draft when you're writing fiction, because maybe you'll want to go back to that just to see your progress as a writer over the when you're developing as a writer, or just maybe you might make a mistake, something accidentally gets copied and pasted out or something, or you want to add something back in, or maybe you'll use that material in a later book, or just to have to look back at it and read each draft or something like that. Yeah, many writers do. We do save drafts of our books, but those aren't things we're making up. That's actual fiction and stuff, and we have reasons to. Large sections of Alden Barrett's journal were photocopied, altered by hand, then copied again. Others were spackled with correction fluid, allowing Sparks to shuffle the order or insert new text between sections. Elsewhere, a letter from Alden's friend Kurt has been copied, and a new sentence added. There's only one way out now, through the grave. Across the side of this copy are the words, do not use. One page, buried halfway through a stack of unrelated papers, reveals the whole lazy scam. It's a note supposedly typewritten by Alden and redacted by Sparks for the sake of privacy. Throughout the letter, the name Teresa is whited out and changed to Tina. That was his girlfriend, Teresa. But there's a problem. At 2 different points, Tina is typed directly on the page. In other words, rather than Teresa whited out and replaced with Tina, it's just Tina from the outset. Since Alden, A, didn't type his journal, and B, wouldn't have called Teresa Tina. It doesn't take Veronica Mars to figure out the rest. And I have mentioned in a few previous videos and blog posts, I use fake names for almost everyone in my journals, because I still do have ideas of someday publishing them. And, I don't want real information to come out. But, most people I know, they don't use fake names for people in their journals, and particularly not the one real person her fraud can be traced back to. It's a clumsy telling mistake. Sparks couldn't even be bothered to forge correctly, much less dispose of the evidence afterward. She assumed, rightly, as it turned out, that people would accept whatever she told them. Gross. And here's one more bonus thing and reading from Mr. Emerson's book about her whole avoiding real editing for these books because she presented them as real. She basically had this screw you, I do what I want, her attitude when her editors and agents dared to tell her, oh, maybe we should change this up a little bit, or this isn't adding up, this is kind of weird. Like, she just like totally ignored them. Like, I mean, I don't like to self-diagnose, but you just can't help but wonder, like, maybe she had some legitimate like mental issue, like ADHD or something like that. Maybe she was like autistic or something like that, because this just isn't what you would expect from like a well-adjusted neurotypical person, beyond just being like a total like narcissist and egomaniac. Maybe she really did have, something that was like her brain was just wired in this way that made her act like this. The sales department has some worries. Putting a grown-up's name on the cover for It Happened to Nancy might scare kids away. It would look much better with just true story and teenage diary and the other selling points. Nothing formal or adult. That worked for Alice, right? Maybe you can strike a balance, putting Sparks' name on the back cover, but in big letters. That should make everyone happy. You send the idea to Beatrice Sparks. The fax machine squeals to life 3 days later, shoving out thin sheets of crinkly paper. One by one, they curl and drop into a pile. It's your letter to Sparks with handwritten notes all over it. What kids don't know, the 2 words don't know are underlined, can, cue the all caps, hurt them. Kids respect education, and she's just randomly capitalizing words just like many of her characters. You'd be surprised how many want to be psychologists or therapists of some kind. Oh, just like all of her characters. Next to your suggestion about keeping the cover grown-up free, there's another long scroll. When kids find a grown-up, in quotes, again, quoting random words they trust, and this is all underlined, they trust completely. My problem is trying to get away from them after a month in session. After a month in session, she must mean with her teenage patients. She is a PhD, and then it goes on about how she lied about the CDC approving the manuscript, and suddenly all these new long passages are showing up out of nowhere in the latest update she sends, and she just won't answer anything about that. Once again, Sparks sends your own letter back to you, covered with notes. At the bottom is a whole paragraph about the new material, not really addressing anything or admitting she was wrong or misleading. It Happened to Nancy is a compilation from her diaries. Seriously? Note scribblings on margins, where interviews with family, friends, and teachers, and over 40 tapes which I made. That impression is not gotten at all from reading the book. It reads like an actual, diary, not, and if you, I understand maybe some real published diaries might be supplemented, but normal editors and compilers and such, they indicate it by putting, something in brackets or a footnote or just mentioning it, or they do asterisks to section off sections between the real diary entries. They don't just, oh, I'm presenting it as a diary, but it's not all from a real diary. Just some of her friends told me this and I just decided to embellish. Then it's not a real diary. I mean, obviously none of her books were real diaries except the 21 of the entries in Jay's journal that will be a future video, but she did not present it. I'm lost for words. She just, how could you think it wasn't intended to be a diary? She presented it this way and then pretended, oh, it was made from all this other stuff. What an idiot. I'm just totally lost for words. I thought you understood that. Patronizing crap. Never did I say it was word to word hers. Seriously, you kind of implied that if you didn't outright say it. I put her thoughts and materials together as I thought they would best tell her story. Then, sorry if you misunderstood, patronizing, you know what. Thank you very much for watching all the way to the end, and please consider leaving a comment. I like having conversations with you guys. Let me know what your opinions are on Beatrice Sparks or other literary frauds in general. Have you read Unmask Alice or any of her other books, or other books not by Dr. Fraud that were later revealed to be fake memoirs or fake diaries? Just anything or any other comments or things about Dr. Fraud I may have missed in either of these 2 videos, 30 reasons why I hate her. And so thank you guys again very much for watching. I will see you soon. Bye.